Okay, since it seems like we're headed here as an industry, I thought I would talk about the hybrid office. So what are we talking about when it comes to hybrid offices? Well, let's start with what we used to have in the pre-2020 world, where most studios, at least most AAA studios, you went to an office, most people were in a single location, and you worked together, you had meeting rooms, you had a desk, you had a computer, you had, a picture of a cat saying hang in there on your cubicle, or maybe you had an office of your own, depending on exactly how the layout of the office was. Some studios had multiple locations, and then you had some sort of semi-effective process of communication between those multiple studios. In an ideal world, each studio was responsible for a relatively self-contained team, so every studio had the ability to build self-contained pods that could work and cut down those communication lines and contain them within a location. Some smaller studios were distributed and in various different forms of distributed. Then we suddenly all found ourselves working from home, and every single studio became a distributed studio without a lot of thinking or foreplan or forethought or systems put in place to regulate that. So now you have a team of 200 people in 200 different locations, in most cases still in the same time zone because they were still in the same city because that's what had happened. And you move to doing meetings online. Work was independent, and you used Slack for communication, and you had Zoom for your meetings. And over 2020, most studios kind of figure out how to make that work okay, but a lot of things were lost. Certainly my leadership strategies, my leadership policies that I built up over 10 years did involve a lot of informal observation and communication that essentially became impossible to do because everyone was talking to each other through a strand of spun glass. So what happened in the early 2020s is that suddenly the number of meetings exploded, and then everyone figured out that that was terrible and then tried to do other things, and all kinds of things happened. I think most places have found something that is stable. I'm not going to get into an argument about whether or not people are more efficient or less efficient in a work from home environment. I think it's very dependent upon the team, the culture of the team, and the individual involved. And I think when you are measuring individual performance, that's the wrong measurement. The only thing you should care about when you're measuring velocity is the velocity of the team as the whole. And while I think you can make the argument that distributed development might even improve individual velocity, my experience is that it decreases team velocity. But I'm not having that argument right now. Maybe I'll get my thoughts together enough to do a video on that at a later date. One massive advantage of the last 2 years from a cultural perspective is that it applied to everyone evenly. So nobody was being particularly advantaged or disadvantaged by work from home, because regardless of your situation, you were now in the same boat as everyone else. Going forward, that's probably not going to be the case. Okay, so now we're in this distributed world, and what happens is now some studios start hiring people in different parts of the country, because why are they only hiring people in Edmonton or Austin or San Francisco when everyone is on Zoom anyway? They can hire wherever they want, wherever the talent is. And that's great. But now as we come out the other side of all of this, and I'm not going to say what all of this is because I don't want to trigger the algorithm to do something bad to the monetization on this video, we're going to have to decide what the future looks like. And a term that you are hearing bandied about is the hybrid. And so what's the hybrid? The hybrid would be a situation where people would work from home sometimes, go to the office sometimes. That would be the strategy. The problem is that there are a lot of different forms of hybrid, and I think some of them are really bad. And I don't know that people who are advocating for this have all considered the consequences of a hybrid strategy. So let's walk through some of the different possible versions of a hybrid. Okay, so you can go extreme. So this isn't even hybrid. Everyone works from home. There is an office. We do all hands on some cadence. You can come or not come. We will also stream it on Zoom. There is no office. There is a couple of meeting rooms where it is conducive to people gathering. Let's walk through that. That's a pretty extreme case, and I think there are a lot of problems with that. If everyone is online, everyone has the same meeting experience. When we interact with each other, we're all interacting with each other through a camera, and so the social cues are degraded for everyone. I don't think Zoom meetings are nearly as effective as in-person meetings, but at least it's a level playing field. If I have the ability to gather people into a meeting room, but some people are in a different city, then you have a two-tier meeting. You have 8 people in the room who are getting all those social cues, who are getting the side conversations, who are getting the ability to stand out in the hall and have a quick little conversation. And then you have other people who are on Zoom, who are remote, who are having a different experience, a worse experience. So broadly, there are basically 3 forms that a hybrid work experience could take. The first would be in the office dominant, meaning that you are mostly in an office in a physical location and you have the ability to work from home occasionally. So in this case, the support lives with the office. You have a desk, you have a cubicle, you have a computer in the office, and the support for working from home is relatively limited. If you have a laptop, you can take it with you. If you don't, you probably are on your own for computer hardware at home. In this case, communication in the case of a remote person largely falls to that person. What I mean by this is that the expectation is you are physically able to attend meetings, and if you don't, it is up to you to ensure that your communication experience is adequate to your needs. On the opposite side would be work from home dominant. In this case, the support lives with working from home. There might be an office, but the expectation is, for the most part, you're not coming into the office except for under very specific circumstances. In that case, unlike the work from the office dominant situation, communication in meetings falls to the person running the meeting. The meeting is going to be happening entirely over Zoom. In fact, even for people in the office, you probably develop a policy of people staying at their desks and you don't go into a meeting room because you're trying to keep the experience equitable for everyone. Those 2 cases can basically work because they are either mostly like work from home or they are mostly like work in the office, and people that are doing something other than those norms are expected to kind of cover for the shortcomings. But what we seem to be headed for is this middle case of a true hybrid experience. And in that case, people move in and out of the office, and the responsibility for communication in meetings, it's not really clear, because when you have a meeting, half the people might be in the office, half the people might be remote, and what do you do about that? Whose responsibility is it to ensure that everyone is getting the best communication experience that they can? Do you degrade the experience of the people in the office in order to try to maintain an equitable communication experience for everyone? Do you require people to come to the office? What exactly are you going to do? This center middle case is, for me, the very worst of all the 5 sort of possible cases of our future work experience. Let's talk about costs, because I think this is one of the ones that people, employees, haven't really thought of when they're talking about hybrid, but I guarantee you the employers have thought about. So right now, if you're working at a game studio and you're at home, there's a reasonably good chance that they sent your computer home with you. There's a reasonably good chance that your hardware that you need, your game console, your test kits, is in your house right now. It's not at the office. If you move back to the office, all of that hardware is going to move back with you into the office. Some of you, and I was one of these people, can work mostly on a laptop. So you can move back and forth relatively easily. But if you are a dev who is doing actual dev, you need a pretty good piece of hardware. You might have a Cintiq because you're an artist and you're using a Cintiq for creating art, or you might need a computer that's powerful enough to play the game at 60 frames per second because you are a tester, or you are a programmer and you need 2 extra monitors to handle the data inflow that's happening, or you need a console dev kit. You're not lugging those back and forth every single day that you decide to work at the office or work at home. So what's going to happen? Do you think the employers are going to get you 2 sets of hardware? Because they don't want to do that. They want to have 1 set of hardware per person. And let's take it even further. If you're mostly working from home, they're not going to want to have office space dedicated to you. You're not going to have a cubicle with hanging their kitten on the edge of the cubicle. You're going to get a hot seat desk. So what's a hot seat desk? A hot seat desk is there will be a pool of desks that are available to be booked for you to sit down and use when you come into the office. If you've traveled to other studios, that's basically how it works. There's a few places that aren't being used. You can plunk yourself down there. That computer's not set up for you. If there's a computer at all, that's what's going to happen. You're not going to have an office at home all set up perfectly and an office at work all set up perfectly, because that's doubling up the costs for having you as an employee. Employers aren't going for that. I mean, they can be forced into going for that if that's what everyone in the entire industry decides. And let me ask you this question. Have you ever been bumped off of a flight because they overbooked it? The reason that airlines overbook flights is because they know that some percentage of people are not going to show up. Video game studios, they're big companies as well. They are also going to try to optimize their costs by not having enough hot seats for everyone. They're only going to have a percentage of the studio in terms of seats, which means that on occasion, when you want to go into the office in this hot seat hybrid world, you might find there is no desk space for you because the studio has gotten rid of a bunch of its office space in order to reduce costs. Because why is it keeping all this unused office space when people are working from home so much? But this is going to result in collisions, and it's going to result in a suboptimal working experience because your desk mate day to day is going to change. Right now, I can tell you that employers are going to reluctantly accept a hybrid work environment because it's being demanded right now. But the consequences of that are 2 tiers of communication. And for employees, I think it's going to result in one of those 2 locations of work being worse than the other, because either they're going to essentially sublet your desk, or they are going to not give you a computer for you to be at home. As an industry, before we decide that hybrid is the way to go, I think we should take a good hard look at it. My vote would be going back to the office, but again, old manager pining for the days where I could actually see the team if I walked around the floor. Distributed might be the way to go. I don't think that hybrid is the solution. Look, I get that this is probably happening, but given that it's happening, we can at least steer towards one of the less bad extremes, either steering towards a work from home dominant stance or a work from the office dominant stance, and try to avoid the very middle of this range, which, as I've talked about, I still feel is the worst of the 3 options. If you find yourself in a studio that is using a hybrid approach, my recommendation for you, for your career, is to be one of the people who spend most of your time in the office, because this is going to get you noticed. It's going to get more attention on you. If you were hired by a company remotely with an expectation that you could remain remote, that may be true. But if you are remote while much of the rest of the studio is returning to an office situation, then you run the risk of stalling your career because you are not getting noticed as much as people who are having face-to-face interactions with managers, with other people. This can be surmounted. I've worked with people remotely. I've worked with people literally in New Zealand, which is about as far away from Alberta as you can get, and they were very successful in that role, and they were recognized for their work. But that was an exceptional case with an exceptionally strong individual individual. If you are looking to work to move up in your career, potentially moving into managerial roles, doing so remotely is going to be extremely difficult. It can be done. I don't want to tell you that you have to move, but being on location in a studio that has a significant percentage of its workforce in an office is an advantage. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you are interested in becoming a member, there will be a link down in the description. If you found this useful, then please give it a thumbs up because that will tell YouTube that it is garnering interest. If you feel like someone else needs to get this message, share this video with them. If you want to argue with me and say that hybrid is the best of the three possible solutions, you're wrong, but go ahead and do it in the comments. We can have a conversation. I will see you again soon. Thank you.